The year is 1939. A shadow has fallen across Europe. The world holds its breath on the precipice of a conflict that will engulf it entirely. In the corridors of power and the hushed laboratories of universities, a new and terrible fear is taking root. It is not just the fear of marching armies or fleets of bombers darkening the skies. This is a deeper, more elemental anxiety, born from a scientific discovery so profound it feels almost like black magic. The greatest minds of the age know that a new kind of weapon is possible, a weapon that could draw its power from the very fabric of the universe, from the heart of the atom itself. This knowledge sparked a desperate, clandestine race. It was a race against an unseen enemy, a race against the clock, and a race against the terrifying possibility that the other side might get there first. The stakes were nothing less than the future of humanity. The fear was that Nazi Germany, with its formidable scientific establishment, was already well on its way to building this ultimate weapon. To understand this new power, we must journey into a world far too small for the human eye to see. It is the world of the atom. For centuries, we believed atoms were the smallest, indivisible building blocks of everything. But in the early 20th century, scientists began to peel back the layers of this tiny universe, discovering that atoms themselves had a heart, a dense core called a nucleus. And within this nucleus, an almost unbelievable amount of energy was bound up, holding the particles together in a delicate, powerful dance. The key to the bomb lay in breaking this bond. The revolutionary idea was called nuclear fission. It is, in its simplest form, the act of splitting an atom. Scientists discovered that if you could fire a tiny particle, a neutron, at the nucleus of a very specific kind of atom, you could make it unstable. The nucleus would wobble and then violently split into two smaller pieces. This single act of splitting would release a tremendous burst of energy, far greater than any chemical reaction. But more importantly, it would also release 2 more neutrons, or 3 more neutrons. This was the truly critical discovery, the secret to a self-sustaining explosive force. Those newly freed neutrons could then fly off and strike other nearby atoms, causing them to split as well. Each of those atoms would then release more energy and more neutrons, which would in turn strike more atoms. This cascading, ever-expanding process is known as a chain reaction. If you could get enough of the right material packed together in a small space, this chain reaction would happen almost instantaneously. The result would be a release of energy so vast and so rapid that it would create an explosion of unimaginable power, a miniature star, brought to Earth for a fraction of a second. The search was on for the perfect materials, the fissile elements capable of sustaining such a reaction. 2 primary candidates emerged from the theoretical haze. Uranium-235, it had to be painstakingly separated from its far more common and stable cousin, uranium-238, plutonium, which could be created inside a nuclear reactor. Both were incredibly difficult to produce, and both were extraordinarily dangerous. The path to the bomb was now clear, but it was a path fraught with immense scientific and technical challenges. Well, so, that's where the real work began. As the theories hardened into a feasible plan, the United States government initiated a top-secret program of unprecedented scope and ambition. It was given an innocuous, almost mundane code name, the Manhattan Project. This was a deliberate misdirection designed to conceal a nationwide effort. It would eventually employ over 100,000 people. It would consume billions of dollars. It was a secret empire of science and industry, hidden in plain sight. Its nerve center was in the country's most remote corners, far from prying eyes and enemy spies. Immense, city-sized industrial complexes sprang up as if from nowhere. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Hanford, Washington, Los Alamos, New Mexico. In Oak Ridge, sprawling factories were built to enrich uranium. Workers separated uranium-235 atom by atom using colossal magnetic machinery. In Hanford, giant reactors rose along the Columbia River. Their purpose, to transmute uranium into plutonium. These were industrial cathedrals dedicated to a single, terrifying goal: They were run by workers who often did not know the purpose of their labor. At the heart of the project was a secret laboratory on a dusty mesa in Los Alamos. This was the intellectual crucible where the bomb would be designed and built. Led by J. Robert Oppenheimer, a generation of the world's most gifted scientists gathered in isolation. They lived and worked under intense pressure, cut off from the outside world. Within the cloistered walls of the Los Alamos laboratory, the theoretical challenges of building a bomb gave way to practical engineering problems of immense complexity. The core principle was simple. You needed to assemble a critical mass of fissile material very, very quickly. A critical mass is the minimum amount of material needed to sustain an explosive chain reaction. If you assemble it too slowly, the material will begin to react, heat up, and blow itself apart before a significant explosion can occur. The entire device had to go from a safe, subcritical state to a supercritical one in less than a millionth of a second. The scientists pursued two distinct designs, two different technical paths to achieve this rapid assembly. The first and conceptually simpler design was for the uranium bomb. It was known as the gun-type method. One can imagine it as a very straightforward, albeit powerful, firearm. A small, subcritical piece of uranium-235 would be fired down a short barrel, like a bullet, into a larger, stationary, subcritical piece. When they collided, they would instantly form a single supercritical mass, triggering the devastating chain reaction. The second design, required for the more volatile and sensitive plutonium, was far more intricate and elegant. Plutonium had a tendency to begin its chain reaction too quickly, making the gun method unworkable. A new approach was needed. This led to the implosion-type device. In this design, a sphere of plutonium, not quite dense enough to be critical, was placed at the center of a larger sphere of precisely shaped conventional explosives. When these explosives were detonated with perfect synchronicity, they would create a powerful, uniform shockwave that crushed the plutonium sphere inward, compressing it instantly to a supercritical density and initiating the nuclear blast. This implosion method was a monumental scientific and engineering feat. It required a level of precision that had never before been attempted. The explosive lenses had to be perfectly shaped and timed to squeeze the plutonium core evenly from all sides, like crushing a tennis ball into the size of a marble with your hands. Failure to do so would result in an asymmetrical squeeze and a fizzle rather than a full-yield detonation. The scientists in New Mexico were venturing into entirely new territory, crafting a device of exquisite complexity for a purpose of brutal simplicity. By the summer of 1945, the implosion device was ready for a full-scale test. The gun-type uranium bomb was considered so reliable a test was deemed unnecessary. But the implosion design was a different matter entirely. It was so complex, so full of unproven theories that no one could be absolutely certain it would work. A site was chosen in the desolate expanse of the New Mexico desert, the Jornada del Muerto, the Journey of the Dead. The test was codenamed Trinity, a name Oppenheimer later said was inspired by the poetry of John Donne. In the pre-dawn hours of July 16, 1945, a small group gathered. Scientists, military officials, they gathered in bunkers, observation posts. Their faces were etched with anticipation, profound dread. The device, nicknamed the Gadget, sat atop a 100-foot steel tower, wired and waiting. Weather delays had frayed already raw nerves. As the final countdown echoed through the darkness, a strange quiet fell over the desert. The moment of truth had arrived. Would their years of frantic work result in a triumphant success or a colossal failure? At precisely 5:29 a.m., the world changed. A pinpoint of light, brighter than anything ever seen on Earth, erupted in the desert. It was, as one observer said, not a thing of this world. The light was followed by a wave of intense heat, and then, seconds later, a deafening roar that echoed off distant mountains. A colossal ball of fire surged upwards, orange, purple, yellow. It formed into the iconic, terrifying mushroom cloud that climbed miles into the stratosphere. The steel tower was simply vaporized. The desert sand below fused into a green radioactive glass, Trinitite. The sheer power of the blast stunned even the men who had created it. Oppenheimer, watching the terrible beauty of his creation, silently recalled the Bhagavad Gita line, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The test was an unqualified success. The power of the atom had been unleashed. The scientists had succeeded in their monumental task. But in that moment of triumph, a new and chilling question arose. What had they done? What would the world do with this terrible new power? The Trinity test had proven the weapon worked. Now, with the war in Europe over, but the conflict in the Pacific still raging with brutal intensity, the decision was made to use it. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay flew high over Japan. In its bomb bay was Little Boy, a gun-type device loaded with enriched uranium. Its target was the city of Hiroshima, a bustling port and military center. At 8:15 in the morning, the bomb was released. It fell for 43 seconds, then detonated in a silent, blinding flash about 2,000 feet above the city. The immediate effect was cataclysmic. A fireball hotter than the surface of the sun incinerated everything at the center. A shockwave, traveling faster than sound, flattened buildings for miles. A firestorm engulfed what remained of the wooden city. In a single moment, tens of thousands were killed and a city was effectively erased from the map. Survivors wandered through a nightmarish landscape of ruin, suffering horrific burns and the unseen effects of radiation. 3 days later, on August 9th, with Japan still not surrendered, a second mission was launched. The bomber Boxcar carried Fat Man, an implosion-type plutonium bomb like Trinity. The primary target was Kokura, but it was obscured by clouds. The plane diverted to Nagasaki, a city built in a series of valleys. The bomb exploded over the industrial Urakami Valley, destroying a significant portion of the city and inflicting another wave of death and suffering. 6 days later, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender. The use of these weapons brought the world to a stunned halt. Joy and relief were mixed with horror and awe at the scale of destruction. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were burned into the global consciousness as symbols of a new age of warfare and human suffering. The world had seen the power of the atom, and the sight was both terrifying and deeply sobering. The consequences of that secret race in the desert were now visited upon humanity in the most devastating way imaginable. The atomic bomb did not just end a war. It redrew the map of global power and introduced a permanent state of anxiety into international affairs. In the years that followed, the secret of the bomb could not be contained. The Soviet Union, aided by espionage, detonated its own device in 1949, and the Cold War arms race began in earnest. The world was now divided into two camps, each armed with weapons capable of ending civilization. For the next 4 decades, humanity lived under the shadow of the mushroom cloud, in a state of what was grimly called mutually assured destruction. The scientists who had worked so diligently on the Manhattan Project were left to grapple with the profound moral and ethical consequences of their creation. Many, including Oppenheimer himself, became outspoken advocates for international control of nuclear energy and warned against the dangers of a nuclear arms race. They had unlocked the door to a new power, but they were terrified of what humanity might do with it. The genie, as they say, was out of the bottle, and it seemed impossible to put it back in. Their story became a cautionary tale about the dual nature of scientific progress. The story of the atomic bomb is a human story from start to finish. It is a story of brilliant minds and difficult choices, of patriotism and fear, of ingenuity and destruction. It demonstrates that the pursuit of knowledge is never a neutral act. It comes with a heavy burden of responsibility. The power to split the atom brought with it the power to light cities or to vaporize them. The same discovery can fuel a peaceful future or threaten our very existence. This is the central, unsettling paradox that the creators of the bomb left for all future generations to manage. Today, as we stand here in 2026, the world is a different place, but that essential lesson remains. The light that rose over the New Mexico desert in 1945 has never truly faded. It serves as a permanent, quiet reminder of our own awesome and terrible capabilities. It asks us to proceed with caution, to think deeply about the consequences of our actions, and to remember the immense human cost that can come from unleashing a power we do not fully understand. The story of the bomb is a whisper from the past, urging us toward a wiser, more careful future.